Hey there, I hope things are going well for you. Better than things are going for Elon Musk, at least. He's been through a series of public humiliations as of late. Like, for example, the catastrophic Cybertruck crash tests that show that the car has no crumble zone and will likely kill anyone and everyone inside of it. Or being exposed as an anti Semite for agreeing with neo Nazis on Twitter, and then subsequently going on an apology tour to Israel. Or proudly proclaiming that he's too pure for Grand Theft Auto because he just hates crime so damn much, even fictional crime. Or Tesla being put through the ringer as the strike against the company intensifies in Sweden. This strike is important, but why is it important? What do the striking workers want, and what has happened so far? Let's start by talking about the timeline of the Swedish strike against Tesla, as of the recording of this video. The strike was initiated by the Swedish union IF Metall on October 27th, specifically at all Tesla workshops in Sweden. The union stated, as they have over the course of this entire strike, that the explicit reason for the strike is that Tesla has refused to sign a collective bargaining agreement, a CBA. Now, what is that? I'll talk about that in greater detail later in the video, but in short, it is an agreement between a union and an employer on the basic conditions for workers, which includes anything and everything really: wages, vacation days, overtime pay, etc. On November 3rd, after initial negotiations broke down, IF Metall expanded the strike to include all workshops, not just Tesla ones. This does not mean that employees at other workshops strike fully, but rather that they do not service Tesla vehicles specifically. Otherwise, work continues as usual at these workshops. Tesla tried to circumvent the strike by becoming perhaps the first company in modern Swedish history to bring in strike breakers, scabs, to work in place of striking workers. Tesla's Swedish management were also instructed by their American overlords, including Elon Musk, to under no conditions sign a CBA. It was also reported by Aftonbladet on December 6th that a Tesla lobbyist had emailed the Swedish Minister for Employment and Integration, Johan Persson, to request a meeting to inform him on the conflict that Tesla is currently in. The Swedish government declined the meeting and stated that it supports the Swedish model. In other words, businesses and unions privately coming to agreements without government interference. These anti-labor practices on the part of Tesla forced IF Metall to request sympathy measures from other unions in order for the strike to be effective. A large number of unions have since joined. Transport- and Hamnarbetarförbundet joined on November 7th, Elektrikerna and Fastighetsanställdas förbund on November 17th, SECO on November 20th, Målarna and ST on November 21st, and Byggnads on November 28th. Note here that these unions joining the strike means that the workers in the trades they represent continue to work as usual, but do not do any work related to Tesla. Some of these unions are more noteworthy in the context of this strike than others. For example, Elektrikerna, a union for electricians, are not doing any work at Tesla-owned facilities or Tesla charging stations across the country. So let's hope for Tesla's sake that no charging stations or electric machinery break down during the strike. A particularly hard-hitting sympathy measure against Tesla began when SECO and later ST joined the strike. That's because they represent postal workers at Post Nord, meaning Tesla is not getting any mail. Why is that so significant? Put simply, because Post Nord has an exclusive contract with the Swedish Transport Agency to deliver license plates. That means that Tesla, a car manufacturer isn't getting any license plates for its cars. Yikes. Elon Musk commented that, quote, "this is insane," end quote, in response to this. And the only thing I can say to that really is, welcome to the Swedish labor movement, bitch. On November 27th, Tesla sued the Swedish state and PostNord, a legal battle that is still ongoing. However, we can comment on what has already happened, of course. The court initially ordered PostNord to continue delivering license plates until a proper decision could be made, but PostNord argued that they wouldn't be able to enforce this, as their employees are allowed to engage in strikes, as a right protected in the Swedish constitution, which means that it is out of PostNord's control to make their employees deliver the license plates. On December 7th, the court reversed its initial decision and announced that PostNord would not be made to deliver license plates while the legal process continues. The court also decided temporarily that Tesla can collect the license plates themselves directly from the Swedish Transport Agency, despite PostNord having an exclusive contract to deliver them. But the Swedish Transport Agency appealed against this decision on December 4th on the basis of security and just how Tesla were even supposed to collect the license plates. The court rescinded their decision on this as well, meaning that Tesla is currently without license plates for new cars in Sweden. Another important sympathy measure to talk about here is the one by Transport and Hamnarbetarförbundet, the dock workers union. As part of their sympathy striking, they are refusing to unload Tesla cars at Swedish ports. Tesla has, of course, tried to circumvent this, which is why Danish, Norwegian, and Finnish unions have announced that they will also join the strike with sympathy measures, such as the refusal to unload Tesla cars meant for Sweden at their ports. This means that it is so much harder for Tesla to get cars into Sweden, and even if they do, they're not getting any license plates. Furthermore, on November 24th, IF Metall instructed workers at Hydro Extrusions, which produces components necessary for the production of Tesla cars in Germany, to block the production of these parts. That about sums up the current situation with the strike. Although I also want to mention that on November 13th, IF Metall, the union that is striking, increased strike pay from 100% of salary to 130% of salary for all striking workers. The contract secretary of IF Metall, and excuse me for butchering this Finnish name, Veli-Pekka Seikkele, told Dagens Arena, quote, "Those who strike risk losing holiday pay and contractual pension, so we are making up for that loss," end quote. Now we understand what is happening. Let's talk about why it's happening. A good place to start is to hear directly from the striking workers. So here are some testimonials from them, published by IF Metall on its website. They were originally in Swedish, of course, so I've translated them as closely as I was able to. Quote, "I like my workplace and Tesla as a company, but without a collective agreement, they can do exactly what they want. We are not safe and secure without collective agreements. Some colleagues have not received a penny in pay rise due to stress and productivity that has not been achieved. In these tough times, it doesn't feel right at all." End quote. Quote, "You are promised better career opportunities and salary and so on. As long as you put your best foot forward, work hard, and are loyal. The problem is that the promises are not fulfilled." End quote. Quote, "I'm on strike because Tesla is a company that believes a little discount and stock options benefit workers more than improved pensions, better insurance, shorter working hours, and a guaranteed annual salary increase. Such a company must shape up, sign a collective agreement, and follow the Swedish model." End quote. Quote, "I am on strike to get a safe, secure, and sustainable workplace. Tesla does exactly what they want. Our salary increase, if we even get one, is based annually on how our productivity is as technicians. At the same time, there are not enough jobs in our workshop to even be able to reach a reasonable level of productivity. How can we get a salary increase in that case? It's time for Tesla to show that they are a serious employer that cares about their employees and not just about their quarterly report. End quote. Quote, I'm tired of empty promises. End quote. Quote, I am striking because I want safe conditions at work, decent conditions at work that clearly state what my duties are. For me, this is also a struggle for the younger generation who work at Tesla, as our occupational pensions are bad. I want to feel like I want to work here until I retire, but it doesn't work like this, and that's why I want change. That's why I'm on strike. End quote. Quote, it's not just the salary I'm striking for, but it's to have more security and influence in the workplace. That the employer cannot control and change the business in any way without even talking to us employees. We want to be involved in changes at the company. End quote. And finally, quote, I'm still loyal to Tesla, but the strike means I'm also loyal to my coworkers. End quote. Now we've heard from the people striking and what they say their reasons are, but to understand why the strike is happening, we need to understand the Nordic model. The Nordic model isn't socialism. It's capitalism with benefits, which, to be fair, is better than capitalism without benefits. But the welfare system, the national healthcare system, or the public education system are not what is relevant to this video. Instead, what is relevant is what the Nordic model says about labor and its relationship to capital. You see, Sweden doesn't have a minimum wage, and although there are some worker and workplace protections by law, the bulk of labor rights and conditions, including wages, vacation days, and really anything that can be negotiated, are instead formalized as part of collective bargaining agreements, CBAs, negotiated between businesses and unions. Without collective bargaining agreements, the Nordic model falls. It is a necessary and integral component of the Swedish labor market culture and way of life. The creation of the Nordic model was heavily influenced and, in fact, intertwined with the labor movement, which itself was a reaction to the horrible working conditions that emerged during the Industrial Revolution. The first labor unions in Sweden were founded in the 1870s. Two organizations that were closely related and emerged from the Swedish labor movement were the Social Democratic Party, founded 1889, and the Swedish Trade Union Confederation, founded 1898. In Swedish, these are called Socialdemokraterna and Landsorganisationen i Sverige, LO for short. These two organizations have had a profound impact on how Sweden has developed as a society, and they're still around today and still work closely together. LO is an umbrella organization under which many Swedish unions organize, whereas the Social Democratic Party, as the name implies, is a political party. LO was instrumental in organizing workers as well as pushing workers toward the Social Democratic Party. Meanwhile, the Social Democratic Party was a driving force behind equal and universal suffrage for men and women alike, leveraging their ties to the labor movement to put pressure on the conservatives that opposed equal voting rights. The Social Democrats did this by organizing strikes, protests, and influencing public opinion with the help of LO. After suffrage was won and finally realized in 1921, the year of the first election in which women could vote, the Social Democratic Party dominated Swedish political life for much of the 1900s and remains the biggest political party in Sweden to this day. The Social Democratic Party essentially built Sweden into what it is today, in cooperation with the Swedish labor movement. It is because of them that Sweden is a welfare state with a strong unionized workforce. It is because of the Social Democratic Party that Sweden is a social democracy, go figure. It is this history that laid the groundwork for the Nordic model in Sweden. Unions and labor organizing have for a long time been a cornerstone of Swedish society, and they remain so to this day. Now, I'm not a social democrat, I am a socialist, but I am under no illusion that socialism is right around the corner, ready to spring into existence even within my lifetime. So it is important to defend the systems already in place that protect the rights and interests of working people. Labor unions fill that role in the Nordic model. Institutions that were created by and for workers to advocate for the best possible deal for workers as a collective group in a capitalist system. And they do so by negotiating with employers on behalf of employees, securing collective bargaining agreements. That is the Swedish system, the local custom, and why Swedish workers enjoy relative prosperity. Tesla's refusal to negotiate with IF Metall and come to mutually agreeable terms as part of a CBA is unacceptable. A multinational corporation refusing to engage with the systems in place that give power and a voice to Swedish workers is unacceptable. And quite frankly, it is a threat to the system as a whole, a dangerous precedent to set in a capitalist economy, where other corporations would want to follow. Collective bargaining agreements are essential to the Swedish way of life. This doesn't mean you can't also negotiate an even better deal as an individual. Collective bargaining agreements are merely the floor, and a higher floor means a higher ceiling. CBAs help everyone, all workers, by lifting up those at the bottom and helping those above by giving them more bargaining power. Take note of that last word, power. This concept is essential to the conversation. Those who oppose unions, labor organizing, and collective bargaining often try to create this narrative where unions get in the way and poison the relationship between the individual worker and their employer. They mean that it hinders the individual's ability to negotiate a better deal for themselves. This is obviously not true, of course, as it is possible to negotiate as an individual even with a CBA. More possible even, you are now negotiating from a stronger position. There's a floor you and everyone else can't fall beneath, so it is easier to reach higher. The anti-union narrative is predicated on denying certain realities, such as the fundamentally adversarial relationship between employer and employee, where each party wants to get the best possible deal for themselves at the expense of the other. Or the reality that power dynamics exist, are strongly stacked in favor of employers and determine how much or how little workers get. The people who promote the narrative that negotiations between employer and employee are somehow hindered by unions and CBAs are lying, of course. But they also don't understand power. Or perhaps they do and just spread misinformation because they want workers to suffer. You see, an individual worker and an employer do not have equal amounts of power, especially not if we're talking about a multinational corporation. A worker is just one person, whereas a corporation is an institution. I think it's fairly intuitive to understand that one individual person does not have as much power as Google or Disney or, Tesla. Private institutions control the means of production and hold massive amounts of capital. They essentially control the platform or vehicle that workers need to make a living and live. And if workers then negotiate individually, corporations can threaten to hire someone else, someone cheaper, unless you agree to work for less pay. CBAs stop corporations from using their power to manipulate workers and play workers against each other. because now workers have pooled their collective power into a union, their own institution that also holds the power of an institution. This brings us to part 4 of the video, Lords and Peasants. Because Elon Musk, the world's wealthiest man, who is the CEO of the multinational corporation Tesla, is exactly the type of person who pushes the false narrative that unions get in the way. And he has a personal incentive to do so as a capital holder. Musk has a long history of anti labor rhetoric and union busting activities. Musk habitually and repeatedly espouses anti union propaganda, often with veiled threats. And he does so from his position as CEO of Tesla, the man at the top of the corporate hierarchy, with absolute hiring and firing power as allowed by law. For example, on May 20th, 2018, Musk tweeted, quote, "Nothing stopping Tesla team at our car plant from voting union. Could do so tomorrow if they wanted. But why pay union dues and give up stock options for nothing?" End quote. This implies that unions have nothing but downsides, even though union workers consistently have better pay and job security than their non unionized counterparts. It also very strongly implies that workers who unionize will be punished by their stock options being taken away. The only reason to take away stock options from unionizing workers is if you are actively trying to disincentivize unionizing. And the only reason to do so is if you fear and resent your own power over workers being challenged by those workers collectively. In fact, a court found this tweet to constitute illegal anti union activity in America, a country with notoriously weak union protections and a largely defeated, although up and coming, union movement. More recently, during the 2023 Dealbook Summit interview by the New York Times, Elon Musk made a number of disparaging comments about unions. He made these comments in response to a question about unionizing efforts at Tesla's American facilities, but the comments obviously transcend national borders and can tell us much about his view of the Swedish Tesla strike as well. There's a short section of the interview that I want to take a look at that concerns Musk's attitude toward unions. So let's watch.
How worried are you that the unionization effort that just took place I shouldn't say effort, but the new wages and the like at GM and Ford, that they're coming for you? And they are coming for you. What is that going to mean to you and your business?
Well, I think it's generally not good to have an adversarial relationship between people on the line, one group at the company and another group. In fact,
the two groups he's referring to here are workers and management, employees and employers, those at the bottom of the corporate hierarchy, and those at the top who control the livelihoods of those at the bottom. It would be easy to say he's being naive here when he says that he doesn't like an adversarial relationship between these two groups. But I don't think he's being naive. No, this is weaponized solidarity, the lie that we're all in this together. This is not unique to Musk, as other corporations and even small businesses like to do this as well, often by falsely claiming that we're all friends, family even, and it would be wrong to fight with family. It would be wrong to distrust family or to challenge the family hierarchy. The truth is that in a capitalist economy, the relationship between employer and employee is inherently adversarial because the two parties have diametrically opposed interests. Employers want cheap labor, employees want as much money as possible for their labor. You can't escape this reality with an appeal to some nebulous make-believe concept of family, a weaponized concept of family.
I disagree with the idea of unions But perhaps for a reason that is different than people may expect, which is I just don't like anything which creates kind of a lords and peasants sort of thing. And I think the unions naturally try to create negativity in a company and create a sort of lords and peasants situation.
And now we've arrived at the title of the video. Musk's claim that unions create lords and peasants. Somehow. He says he disagrees with the idea of unions, the idea of labor organizing as a means to more effectively utilize their collective power. He doesn't explain how unions would create lords and peasants, because he can't, because the opposite is true. Instead, what he opposes is any institution that can challenge his power, which is exactly what a union would do. He doesn't like that because he is the Lord and workers are the peasants. And the Lord doesn't want to be challenged by the peasants. And what even is the supposed negativity that unions create at workplaces? I guess reminding workers of the inescapable fact that they have an adversarial relationship with their boss? Or demanding better wages and working conditions for workers? Or stopping Tesla from forcing their employees to come to work during lockdowns in the midst of a deadly pandemic?
There are many people at Tesla who have gone from working on the line to being in senior management. There is no lords and peasants. Everyone eats at the same table. Everyone parks in the same parking lot. You know, at GM, there's a special elevator only for senior executives. We have no such thing at Tesla.
I'm sorry, but you don't get credit for not having a special elevator that the peasants aren't allowed to use. Now, I want to take a look at a couple of other sources before we continue listening to Musk say more completely sensible things. As we can see in this graph created by Statista, the aggregated CEO to worker compensation ratio at large companies has increased massively from the 70s until today. In 1973, for example, CEOs made, on average, 22.7 times more money than their employees. In 2021, they made 389 times more. In case you're wondering, the reason why there is such fluctuation in CEO pay between 2000 and today is that much of this compensation is in the form of stock options and is thus dependent on the market. But CEOs consistently make way more money than workers. Now let's look at this article by the Economic Policy Institute, which claims that, quote, CEO pay has skyrocketed 1,460% since 1978, end quote. They go on to say that, quote, exorbitant CEO pay is a contributor to rising inequality that we could restrain without doing any damage to the wider economy. CEOs are getting ever higher pay over time because of their power to set pay and because so much of their pay, more than 80%, is stock related. They are not getting higher pay because they are becoming more productive or more skilled than other workers, or because of a shortage of excellent CEO candidates. This escalation of CEO compensation and of executive compensation more generally has fueled the growth of top 1% and top 0.1% incomes, leaving fewer of the gains of economic growth for ordinary workers and widening the gap between very high earners and the bottom 90%. The economy would suffer no harm if CEOs were paid less or were taxed more, end quote. Now, are you ready for the depressingly funny reveal of this report? Elon Musk was such a crazy outlier that they had to exclude him from the report because he skewed the pay gap even worse in favor of CEOs. The report states, quote, in 2021, Elon Musk exercised $23.5 billion worth of stock options that would have expired in 2022. This would have made his pay almost 1,000 times that of the average large company CEO. Including him in our sample would have resulted in an increase of CEO pay in 2021 relative to 2020 of over 300%. Because inclusion of this extreme outlier would have made this year's numbers incomparable with previous year's numbers, we opted to exclude Tesla and Musk from our sample entirely. End quote. That's amazing. He's raking in billions, but at least he doesn't have a private elevator. Fast Company reported in 2019 that, quote, Elon Musk made 40,668 times more than a median Tesla employee, end quote, in 2018. And he only made $2.28 billion that year, not $23.5 billion like he did in 2021. But obviously, there are no lords and peasants at Tesla. Everyone rides the same elevator after all. There are no workers who could dream of even making close to that amount of money, because they don't have the same amount of power as either Elon Musk or Tesla. And it is in Tesla's interests to share as little as possible of the pie with workers. This is a lords and peasants system. Unions level out the playing field, at least a little bit, by utilizing the collective power of workers in negotiations with the lords of the system, such as Tesla. Elon Musk does not oppose a system of lords and peasants. He's just projecting valid criticism of his anti-union and anti-worker ideology onto unions, the only institution workers have to effectively fight for their interests. But let's continue watching the interview.
You know, and the thing is that I actually know the people on the line because I worked on the line, and I walked the line, and I slept in the factory, and I worked beside them. So I'm no stranger to them. And there are actually many times where I've said, well, can't we just hold a union vote? But apparently a company is not allowed to hold a union vote. So it has to be somehow cultural, but the unions can't do it. So I said, well, let's just hold a vote and see what happens.
This is fake posturing. He has a long history of anti-union rhetoric and activities. He holds immense power over workers beneath him, and he's saying this in a system with hollowed-out union and worker protections. He isn't earnestly calling for a union vote. He's just mocking unions and their efforts to unionize at Tesla.
The actual problem is the opposite. It's not that people are trapped at Tesla building cars. The challenge is how do we retain great people to do the hard work of building cars when they have like 6 other opportunities that they can do that are easier. That's the actual difficulty, is that building cars is hard work and there are much easier jobs. And I just want to say that I'm incredibly appreciative of those who build cars, and they know it. So
I actually love this. In one breath, he says that Tesla is the best place in the world to work at, and everyone is equal, basically family. And in this next breath, he says the work at Tesla is so backbreaking and underpaid that they're struggling to retain workers. But he's too dumb to understand the contradiction. At the very least, he's not lying right here. In 2017, The Guardian reported on the poor working conditions at Tesla factories, including high stress and injuries, even life-changing injuries. The article notes that, quote, ambulances have been called more than 100 times since 2014 for workers experiencing fainting spells, dizziness, seizures, abnormal breathing, and chest pains, according to incident reports obtained by The Guardian. Hundreds more were called for injuries and other medical issues, end quote.
there's I don't know, maybe there will be unionized. If
Godspeed.
I say, like, if Tesla gets unionized, it will be because we deserve it and we failed in some way.
This logic doesn't even remotely follow. Even if Tesla were, in the context of capitalism, a perfect employer with high wages and good working conditions, it doesn't follow that a union isn't necessary. A union is always necessary. Even if you have a nice boss, They're still your boss and they still have power over you. The power imbalance isn't fixed simply by one boss at one company being nice. Every single worker at every single workplace should be in a union, and they all need collective bargaining agreements. Musk has repeatedly made the same claim that a lot of anti-union capitalists like to make, that he's so nice that a union isn't necessary. And that's what he's doing here. He's trying to portray the situation as if he is on the side of workers and wants what's best for them, when that is demonstrably untrue and completely irrelevant to the conversation. Besides, there's something fundamentally sinister about someone claiming to be your friend while trying to undermine your interests.
But we certainly try hard to ensure the prosperity of everyone. We give everyone stock options. We've made many people who are just working the line, who didn't even know what stocks were, we've made them millionaires.
I'd like to point back to those sources we looked at before on the insane pay gap between Elon Musk and employees. The fact that some people are making good money at Tesla was never in question, or even relevant. This conversation is about the inherent power imbalance between workers and businesses, an imbalance that can only be remedied in a capitalist economy through unions and collective bargaining.
So,
we're going to run out of time. Final couple quick questions. When do you have the time to tweet or to post? I actually think about it all the time. As I said,
I
use
go to
it.
the bathroom sometimes.
I really hate how softball this interview is. Just a friendly chat with someone who, a few weeks ago, openly agreed with neo-Nazis on the Jewish question. A fluff piece, really. Elon Musk is just given space to say completely outlandish things, like unions somehow creating a lords and peasants system. Yet the interviewer offers no pushback and instead asks Musk how he has time to tweet so much between doing all the hard work he does. Well, the answer to your question, Andrew, is that he doesn't work as much or as hard as he wants you to believe. Instead, he has thousands of workers underneath him whose work he claims as his own. Shocking revelation, I know. Yet, he's the one raking in the billions. Okay, now we've talked about the Swedish Tesla strike, the Nordic model and collective bargaining agreements, and Elon Musk's anti-worker views regarding all of this. So what does all this tell us? It tells us that Sweden has a long and battle-tested history of labor activism, successful labor activism. But it also tells us that the Nordic model must be diligently defended against large international corporations that try to bully and cheat their way out of the rules that otherwise apply to everyone, all businesses operating in Sweden. All major businesses, with the exception of some small businesses and a couple of larger corporations, have signed collective bargaining agreements with Swedish unions. It is the custom of the Swedish labor market. Klarna, another big corporation that didn't want to sign a collective bargaining agreement in Sweden, was broken under the weight of Swedish labor and made to sign a CBA on November 4th. Spotify is another company that doesn't want to sign a CBA and is also facing union resistance. And finally, Tesla, of course, which this episode has been about. Tesla cannot be allowed to be an outlier and a bully that is able to say no to collective bargaining with unions. If they are allowed to do so, other corporations will want to follow, and there goes the whole model. Tesla needs to be broken by the unified strength of Swedish workers now, or there will likely be worse fights for workers' rights in the future. With this in mind, I'd like to offer a warning here, especially to any Swedes watching. Union membership in Sweden is very high, but has been steadily declining as workers lose sight of what unions provide and of the long history of battles between employers and unions. Loss of membership weakens unions, and that weakens the entire Nordic model and labor rights in Sweden. So, join a union. Again, Join a union. It's important, not just here and now, but for the future of labor rights, locally and globally. The Tesla strike is important for the international labor movement as an example of a successful strike against a vicious international corporation. We, working people, need to show that together we have the power to take on any corporation, no matter its size, and successfully extract concessions. Seeing successful union activity in Sweden could be a rallying cry to unionize elsewhere. Obviously, there have been and will be strikes in other countries too, and my argument for them is the same. Every strike, no matter how big or small, is important for the international labor movement. After all, neither the global capitalist economy nor solidarity between workers knows of any cultural barriers or lines on a map. Anyway, thanks for listening. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe. If you enjoyed the video and would like to see more, please consider supporting me on Patreon. Any and all support is greatly appreciated. I'd also like to recommend my video on the Swedish far right titled The Sweden Democrats: How the Swedish Far Right Has Become Mainstream. It's a great deep dive into the threat of the modern far right, specifically in Sweden. But thanks again for watching, and see you in the next episode.